Guénier, thank you very much for taking part in this panel. I'd like you to tackle this acceleration of the fintech dynamic in the Paris market. But to start with, can you detail the role of this finance innovation cluster? Which role does it play in supporting fintech in France?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. I think for the financial innovation cluster, what we're trying to do as part of the Europlace attractiveness and what we're doing together is to coalesce all the actors, the big corporates, the startups, the research people in France and beyond that with a connection throughout the world to make those investment in fintech or in the innovation in finance, because it's not only fintech, it's innovation broadly speaking. What we're trying to do with our 600 members is to make everyone working together. We are financed partly by the French state, and we're happy for that because it gives us the blessing and the independence for doing something that is, I think, very important to do, is to ensure that everyone is recognized as such in the system. And we've been working for the last 13 years to invest in the ecosystem, to understand it in France, and to help every investors in the future here to understand what talents they can approach, how they can be connected with them, how they can invest here in France and abroad in Europe, how they can cooperate, what kind of research and development project they can do with us, with our support, being connected with the European institutions. So this is what we're doing together. And I think it's working. And we have seen that now. The future is about scaling. And having worked in the Silicon Valley for some years, 15 years ago, I think the mindset is starting to be better here in terms of having bigger dreams, bigger approach to financing, making big bets. And I think this is good. So the acceleration for me is there through some numbers. 4 or 5 years ago, 200 million funding on fintech. Today, probably around 1 billion. 10 unicorns last year, probably 15 this year. With Shift, Allen, Ledger, some of them are now known. And I think what we're seeing also is that foreign investors are coming here from the US, like big funds very well known in the US, like Sequoia or SoftBank. And I think this is a good sign. I think the investors now recognize that Europe is a big market. They're coming from other parts of the world, and I think this is very good. So I would emphasize the fact that it's probably now that those investors should come. And I think it's now for us to decide if we want to be bigger, to bet more, and to try to eliminate some of the barriers that we built over time. So I think this is what is good about this acceleration.
I'd like to tackle furthermore this acceleration of the fintech dynamic in the Paris market with you. To what extent can we talk about a rise in this fintech in Paris and in France?
But this is what I said. I think we're seeing those investors coming in. We're seeing those needs to be bigger. And we're seeing in different aspects with the IPO, with all the efforts that have been made recently, that those guys that are coming understand the dynamics much better. And they also understand that in our countries, the cost of operating is probably rising. And the competitiveness of this big market here in Europe is creating much more interest with the quality of people we have. And I think this matters a lot.
We have one example of this fintech industry with Kiriba. Samuel Guillon, thank you to be with us. Can you describe rapidly, please, your company and tell us why do you think that France is well equipped to help companies like you?
Thank you very much for inviting us first. We are very honored to be there. Maybe a few words about Kiriba as a start. So Kiriba is a French fintech, and it was a French fintech even before this word was invented. We are known as a global leader in treasury management and corporate payments cloud solution. And we are now defining a whole new category in liquidity management. With more than 2,000 customers trusting our solutions, we cover 1/5 of the Fortune 500 and 1/4 of the Euronext 50. But our most important asset, as it was said, are people, and without their talent, we cannot build anything. There is 800 people at Kiriba all around the world, but 240 of them are employed in France. And most of the product organization of Kiriba is still in France. And I guess you know that in a SaaS company, the product is the heart of the company. So I think we can say that the heart of Kiriba is beating in France. And that's not the only way how we are anchored in the French ecosystem. First of all, with our shareholders and with our founder. I'd like to pay a tribute here to Jean-Luc Robert, whose tenacity and vision was at the genesis of Kiriba. And back in 2005, when the story started, there was nothing like a competitivity poll, like clusters for innovation. So I believe that that's also a proof point that France was and still is a country for entrepreneurs. We need to name too, none of that would have been possible without the trust of our French investors. We were supported by French banks, such as Braid or BPI France, supported by French VCs, such as Iris Capital, who is still a shareholder of Kiriba. And last but not least, our customers are enabling us with co-innovation in France. We signed very recently AXA and Bell with some co-innovative contracts. And we also started a very important partnership with Société Générale, who is going to provide to its customer the Kiriba treasury management platform in white label. So I believe we are in this matter too, with the relationship between big banks and fintechs, paving the way, and we are doing it still in France.
Bernard Guénier, I know you are modest, but how did the competitiveness cluster help start Kiriba? Can you tell us about your cooperation?
I would say that for Kiriba and many others, the cluster is trying to help. I mean, we're not doing everything, but we're trying to get the connection in place. We understand the ecosystem, partly for the smaller startups, and we're now working and investing in scaling up. So we're going to announce a new way of scaling up those companies, trying to make them together, I think, and work together. This is what we're trying to do. So we have access to talent. We know, as I said, we know how to connect those guys to the right people. Of course, we're only part of the system. Some others are doing different things. What I would say that 10 years ago, the ecosystem was just starting. Now it's very sophisticated, and we need to learn and understand how we can scale up. And this is probably the biggest challenge we have in front of us. And I think what we heard today is showing that the commitment is there to make it better.
The president talked earlier about the startup nation, and now he talks about the scale-up nation. Indeed, Maya Toran, we are lucky enough to have you on our panel. To what extent do you think that France is well equipped to foster technology and innovation?
Well, overall, France is a very research-heavy country. You know, we are accounting for between 3 to 5% of the global GDP spent, which is put into R&D. So the R&D worldwide that people are spending is actually 3 to 5% spent in France. We have a lot of talent. There are 50,000 people graduating from French schools, high-quality schools. Most recently, visibly, 2/3 of those want to create a startup, which is new. Samuel was talking about entrepreneurship. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. But I think we all are aware that you need funding for that to work. And I think Bruno Le Maire already mentioned that. And as a banker, I'm probably well placed to confirm that. And in terms of funding, France has been catching up. One could say that 2020 and 2021 have been breakthrough years. It's the first time in 2020 that in France we were the first country on the continent with respect to the amount of money raised by startups. Historically, we were lagging behind Germany. In 2015, German startups were raising around 3 billion euros, and we in France have been raising 2 billion. So there's been a 1 billion gap in funds raised by startups. That gap has been persisting over the years, although the amounts were increasing. And now, 2020, in France, the French startups, rose approximately 5.4 billion, and that's actually a little bit ahead of Germany for the first time. So that's good. When you dig deeper into that number, it's even better to note that 60% of these funds raised by French startups are actually coming from local VCs. So we have a very locally funded VC world, as opposed to Germany, where it's more around 25%, actually decreasing over the years. So we have a more locally rooted funding. That's important, especially in times of crisis or difficult times, which is also one of the reasons probably which explains the recent, let's say, progression in France versus Germany during COVID crisis. There's not only positive, so there's a lot of things to work on, and scaling up is definitely the theme. And that's a theme which has been already identified a few years ago by the government with the TB initiative. We may talk a little bit more about that later on, which identified the French ecosystem not to allow to fund larger rounds of funding. We have not enough rounds of funding above 50 million versus other countries. That's what's starting to be addressed with notably the TB initiative. One of the ideas behind that initiative is to have larger venture capital funds. We're starting to see some in France above 1 billion of total capital. Eurazeo and Tikeo have raised late-stage venture capital funds above 1 billion. There is another 10 such funds which are in the making slowly, because they're going to get there in the next generation of the raisings. So there are successes in that scaling up. That has also resulted most recently in the largest raisings by companies. Content Square was one. We also have Sorare, which is raising now above 500 million. So we're seeing that amounts that we're talking about in France are larger and larger for these startups and new companies, growth companies. So I think overall we are progressing on the amount of money and also on the size of the funding that's available. So I think we're on the good path to get there for growth and innovation.
I understand why Emmanuel Macron was at the opening of your new building at JP Morgan this morning. You have a lot of very interesting stories. That's your case also, Samuel Guillon. What the next step? The Place de Paris, the financial Paris place is more competitive than it was before. There is an appetite for companies like you. Can you see it?
Yes. So maybe as a start, let's state that the latest fundraise of Kiriba was back in 2019 when we were acquired by Bridgepoint and valued at that time 1.2 billion. So we got the very praised status of unicorns. Not very useful for anything, by the way, except for being a unicorn. But the thing is that from that time, the potential exit of Bridgepoint is certainly an IPO, and maybe the next step for the growth journey of Kiriba. And as we are global, okay, we are closely watching everything happening in the various financial marketplaces where we are operating. So we are lucky to be able to look at what's happening in Singapore, what's happening in the US, what's happening in London, or what's happening in Paris. One thing for sure, if we look at the capital pool, it's much, much deeper in the US. There is no point By the way, there is something in Europe which is very attractive for companies like us. It is the stability of the investors. And in Europe, we can much easier find some long-term investors than in the US. But once again, it's clear that a lot of work has been done to improve the framework of Paris, and now it's much more dynamic and much more competitive. And as Maya said, we also see that the French tech is much more mature. Clearly, we are one of maybe the biggest VC ecosystem in Europe, and even the late stage that has been a weak point for Paris for years is improving. And I hope that Mr. Macron bet to have 25 unicorns by 2025 will be reachable. But if you count Kiriba as a French unicorn, we are already 15 of us. And we've seen a lot of very successful IPOs happening here in Paris. So we will stay very watchful with everything which is happening in Paris, following this trend, not only, by the way, to be prepared as a pre-IPO company, but also to M&A purposes, because it's a very dynamic ecosystem where there are a lot of very beautiful and potential targets.
We talked with Kiriba about payments. Bernard Guénier, which sectors are developing the most? Can we go a little bit deeper in the analysis?
Well, I think some of the sectors have been already indicated a little bit by the previous speakers. I think, first off, the payments, of course, but to some extent, everyone knows about it. I think this has changed a lot the vision the banks have about their role. They are seeing the pressure on that. This is not a given for the fintech to be part of this market, but I think this is dramatically changing. So payments already big. Of course, neobanks with all the regulatory aspect of it. That is not an easy aspect, which is how you can be considered as a bank or not as a fintech, which is, of course, asking questions about the regulation on this. ESG is probably the most interesting area for growth for the fintech in the future or tech in the future, because everything has to be done in this market. All the framework, the technology to put in place, the way you're going to govern your data as a corporate, how the banks are going to operate that, or the asset management system. All of this is going to change. Everything has to be built. So a lot to do. Cyber, of course, this is also very important for the trust in our society. So cyber is a big element of that. Of course, regulation, RegTech, regulation compliance. We talk about that. This has been ongoing for many years. KYC is a big issue for banks. It's costly. How do you improve that? So all of this is massive. And obviously, the last bit is probably all the new technology that are going to take place in this market. So that, like, of course, 5G, AI, quantum technologies, all of this is going to have a massive impact on the way you look at fintech, you look at the financial service sectors as a whole. So all of that is massive opportunities. The big issue for the big players and the corporate is to cope with that, to identify the right way to deal with this, to cooperate, and to reduce the operating costs for the big banks, the big insurance companies. How to deal with that is a big and massive issue with a lot of legacy systems. So for startups, for fintech, there's a lot to do. So that's why the Finance Innovation Cluster is working with them, with big corporate, to make them work together. And it's not always easy, so we have some clues about that. And I think this is what the Europlace is trying to do, is to make this better, easier, quicker.
Thank you, Bernard. He is with us. He has been quiet since the beginning. Philippe Taffin, he is the Chief Investment Officer of Aviva France, which is, as you know, a savings, retirement and insurance business. But he speaks now as the chairman of the Innovation Committee Emergence. Philippe, the Emergence CCAV brings together, if I understand properly, a dozen or large institutional investors who have come together to bring a certain number of financing. Can you tell us who is part of this committee and what the purpose of it, please?
Well, yes,
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about CCAV Emergence, because, financing, the ecosystem and companies is very important. We know that in France we have a very powerful asset management industry, and the CCAV Emergence is a very unique, in the asset management landscape. It was created in 2012, sponsored by for Paris Europlus and the Pôle Finance Innovation. And it was created on the initial idea, on the observation that many young entrepreneurial asset management firms, as many talented people and many innovation, was able to provide all the investors different and alternative sources of value. And unfortunately, this company has great difficulty to access to capital from the big institutional investors because they were too small. So CCAV Emergence was the creation to join 15 institutional investors to put together capital, intelligence, and innovation together. So it was created on this basis. And today, we can say that it worked. We have started 4 compartments. 4 different compartments was launched since inception. 1 on absolute performance, 2 in equities, and last year we launched a European equity compartment in order to open up to the rest of Europe and try to attract capital, foreign capital, from foreign institutional investors, because we know that we cannot really be a European place without interacting with our European colleagues and investors. So we have been able to mobilize more than 1 billion euros since inception. We have invested in 15 investment management firms. And this model is very specific because not only for institutional investors, it's a new way to invest in alternative and innovative sources of value, but it's also a way to support the development of this firm, of these small firms. Just to let you know about one figures, before the date we have incubated this company, they have increased by more than 40% their asset under management. And for investment, it is really a win-win model because not only we can benefit from the superb performance of this firm, but also we have put a sort of very innovative fee-sharing mechanism which allow the institutional investor also to benefit from the business development of these companies. So as you can see, investing well and at the same time supporting the development of the Euro-Paris place.
You told me, I believe, over 1 billion euros was already invested. Can you
yes, across the 4 compartments. So it's quite huge. And of course, as the chairman of the Innovation Commission, we are now in the process to launch a new compartment, which will be dedicated to technology companies.
What's the name of it?
The name is Tech for Good Compartments, because what we want to do is not only to contribute to the strong development of Paris Place center, financial center, in terms of managing and sourcing tech companies, but also we want to enlarge, the basis of the asset manager by promoting more entrepreneurial asset managers. So the fund will invest by around 50% in the funds which are already being homologated by the committee chaired by Philippe Tibi on listed equities. But we also want to invest in some more entrepreneurial companies which will be maybe elected to this committee. So we also want to promote this company and to make them, to enable them, to be homologated by this committee as well.
I'm sure that a lot of people are already interested by this new compartment, Tech for Good. How should they proceed to be selected?
So of course, before launching the compartment, we'll have to select, to appoint, the manager which will select the different asset management and the different funds. So of course, in the RFP, in the questionnaire which will be sent, to the asset manager, we'll be very careful about the way they select the company. So we will check that they really integrate an ESG process, the way they select the company in their investment processes, so as they care about environment, they care about their people, they care about the governance, the way they are managed, the way they share the value across the different employees. So we really, as institutional investors, especially within SICAV Emergence, because in this SICAV Emergence we also have an ESG commission, because we take much about ESG processes. We'll of course rely on that, on the chart which have been put in place in order to put in place the process to select these companies.
Do you want to add something on the achievements of the committee and the SICAV Emergence that you steer, that you manage?
Sorry?
The achievements, because you were very quick, but since
yes, well,
2012,
I think that we, on this specific compartment, we target to invest at least 200 to 300 million, because we all know that many insurance companies have already committed, to contribute, to the TB initiative, and so the fund will offer this institutional investors the possibility to allocate a part of their money to new type of assets managers.
Thank you very much. A lot is going on in Paris, in the Paris place. Maya Toren, you have an international expertise. If we put stock markets intro, for example, IPOs into perspective compared to US, to Amsterdam competitors, would you say that Paris has advantages? And if yes, which ones, please?
For sure, Paris has a lot of advantages. Just to put maybe a couple of numbers forward, 2021 has been a record year in terms of IPOs. If you look at technology in Europe, it's been more than 10 times more IPOs in the first half of this year than last year. So a very busy time. In France, I'm sure that Stéphane Boujnah, who was intervening from Euronext, would be saying the same. We had 15 to 20 IPOs on Euronext, a lot of them on Euronext growth across the sectors. So a very busy time. Probably the markets are a little bit more selective today, and it's good that the summer break is coming, because there is a very busy pipeline for the second half of the year. So definitely a lot of IPOs going on, including in Paris. France has a very good ecosystem, a very savvy ecosystem of equity capital markets. We have a process which allows the companies to benefit from a research-driven education, which allows them to go to the market having educated the investors, pre-sounded and pre-check their story, which is good, versus the process that is in place in the US, which does not allow for such a pre-education by the research, which is a positive. Obviously, we have a very responsive ecosystem with Euronext, with AMF, a lot of banks being capable, including JP Morgan, to run those IPOs. The cost of listing, but also the cost of maintaining compliance is lower than in the US, in the Sarbanes-Oxley environment, which is not to be neglected. But it's in the end all about investors, and it's true that in Europe today the equities, the investment in equities is still driven by US and UK investors. It's 65% of the investors that are investing in EU equities that come from these two geographies. So the issuers on the Paris market would benefit and tap similar investors. as they would if they were going to these geographies, which is good. They also tap an additional strong French investor base. It was mentioned that France has the chance of having among the top 50 worldwide asset managers with a few of our asset managers. So there is a good base of investors in France as well, and they are at over 50% investing in France. So they're quite focused on France, actually. The French money is investing a lot in France, which is good. We could do differently and better on some elements. There is not a lot of pre-IPO funds yet. This is more of a phenomenon that's known in the US, and probably that can be a development in Europe and in Paris to have more pre-IPO investors. Not everyone knows, but Fidelity actually pre-IPO invested in names like Facebook, Snap, Spotify, Uber, and basically allowed them to go to the market, to the stock markets a bit later, which was beneficial for those companies as well. So we could replicate the same in France, and we could also have more global technology funds located in France in order to bring in expertise, because we're talking about tech and innovation, to the French ecosystem, but it's in progress, and overall advancing the right direction again here with a lot of activity earlier this year. So let's see how the next months evolve.
I refer to the title of the station, which is entitled Post-Crisis Technologies. And Samuel, you told me that you haven't seen the crisis, so how lucky. Tell us about this.
I would say that for Kiriba, the crisis has been a booster. Maybe first and foremost because we are part of some very booming markets, such as payments, but also because it has been a catalyst for some market trends and also some technological disruptions. And Kiriba has disruption in its DNA. That's why we pioneered the cloud, and now we are leading an emerging category in liquidity management, which is worth more than $30 billion of total addressable market. But let me give you a few words about this market trends first, because the crisis has dramatically emphasized how liquidity is a strategic resource for corporates. You need to contemplate liquidity as the lifeblood of a business, okay? It is involved, or it supports almost everything a company does, from payrolls to dividends to investment to working capital. And it goes way further outside the walls of the company, because you need to draw down debt, you need to invest your excess cash through money market funds. And that's precisely the mission of Kiriba, to transform the way corporates leverage cash and liquidity to build resiliency, to generate value, and to unlock growth. And in order to do that, we provide the first and leading open platform in enterprise liquidity management. And to tell you what enterprise liquidity management means, I would say that it means strategic planning first, actionable, data-driven decision-making after that. And to do that, you need to unify processes, data, governance, and systems. And obviously, once you need to do that, you need technology. And the kind of technology I believe that investors should be very watchful with are the technology Kiriba is investing heavily in today, such as, obviously, let's first state the cloud, which is clearly not disruptive anymore, but nonetheless, the adoption rate of this technology has been accelerated by the crisis to a point where, in fact, for some critical capabilities inside the CFO suite where we stand, it's now a prerequisite for treasury, for payments. It's a prerequisite to have some cloud solutions. And then, obviously, there is APIs. APIs are incredibly useful to manage connectivity throughout a liquidity ecosystem, to enable machine-to-machine conversations, and it's a prerequisite with the software proliferation that we see today. And API is going to bring something else, which is real-time, and unfortunately for us, human beings will not be able to make relevant real-time decision in a world of massive data. So the next step will be AI to support data-driven decision. And once again, at the end of the day, to make those data-driven decisions actionable, you will need APIs again to execute them at the other end of an ecosystem, and for Kyriba, of a liquidity ecosystem. And as a consequence of all that, I believe that data management is a key technology today, because you want your data management to be real time. You want it to be open. You don't want anymore a data lake which is refreshing every day. In fact, you want an open marketplace where you can subscribe some real-time data streams and be able to build on top of that some agile and innovative data applications. And this openness at Kyriba, we believe that now it's a requirement to foster innovation for the benefit of our customers. I believe that everybody has in mind how Apple disrupted the mobile phone market with the Apple Market Store, and that's exactly why Kyriba is now opening its platform to third-party developers for them to come in the developer portal of Kyriba and to use the APIs exposed by Kyriba to develop services for the benefit of the 2,000 Kyriba customers, and I should say for the exclusive benefit of the 2,000 Kyriba customers. And if I may, I will just use this stage to make an announcement that this portal is open now in public preview. So any startup, any fintech, and I encourage them, can come at this Kyriba developer portal and check what is able to build in terms of liquidity management for the customers of Kyriba. And by the way, it's live because we have already 2 fintechs that are live in the Kyriba application to provide their services to Kyriba customers. And by the way, they are 2 French fintechs. So it's Trustpair and SESID working on the fight against fraud.
You talk a lot, and we talk a lot about technology, about data. There is a lot of technology in health by now. Biotech, medtech, e-health are hot topics as well in this period where COVID is still lurking around. Could you give us example, Maya, please, of what is possible? What is the place of the medicine segment in Paris? Are you in process or in building it up?
For sure, healthcare technology has been fostered by COVID. The attention of everyone has been put on that sub-segment. Definitely an important one for national security and sovereignty, for growth as well. It's today known that in the next 10 years in these sub-segments, the jobs will grow by 3-4 times overall. It's a strong growth sector. We have today in France roughly 2,000 companies in the broad healthcare technology sector. A bit less than 1,000 are in biotech, a bit above 1,000 are in medtech, and then you have the remainder in e-health, which is digital patient experiences, optimizing the flow of the patient and the likes. And it's true that in terms of funding of that sub-segments, we can say that we're a few years back versus where technology overall was. So it's the same challenges, similar themes that we have talked about as having been identified a few years ago for technology funding as such. So firstly, we have raised in France 2020 for the startups roughly 800 million euros. That's 15 to 20% of the number I was mentioning at the beginning, which was the 5 billion plus of funds raised overall by startups. So 15 to 20% of these funds are going to healthcare technology type of startups. But still, the fundraising sizes in France are small. They're in average below 10 million, while in Germany, for instance, they're above 25 million. So much larger. And so there is this topic of scaling up, which is going to appear also in the healthcare technology sector, which we've talked about at length in the broader technology space. And there is an additional challenge in the healthcare technology segment, which is the fact that in Europe, 8 out of the 12 IPOs, which happened recently, have happened actually abroad, not in Europe, but in the US. And so a lot of those companies are still attracted by the US market as the primary listing market. It's been the case in France of the Genfit example, which went to IPO on the Nasdaq. We're trying to turn that around. There are some examples of companies which do it in 2 phases. They go first on Euronext and then on the Nasdaq, which is possibly a more natural and at least a more beneficial way of doing it from a French perspective. But obviously the ambition should be to try to make France and Paris the primary listing location for the healthcare technology companies, which it's not yet. But I'm sure that all the initiatives taken by France Biotech, for instance, will benefit. There's been a first late-stage fund closed by Sofinova a few weeks ago of above 400 million, which is going to accompany these startups to list, hopefully on the French listing Euronext. And obviously, we have at JP Morgan the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco, which is a landmark conference, and we are very happy to put that one to the benefit of any French startup that would want to get more visibility. So hopefully, all that is going to add up, and we're going to move forward also the healthcare technology ecosystem forward, such as we did for the technology ecosystem.
I stay a bit in your field, M&A. As far as M&A are concerned, there's very strong activity. Why are we at all-time highs? And it may be a good driver for Paris, for Europe, for France.
Well, I'll be brief in the interest of time. Indeed, M&A is as active or even more than IPOs. It's been a booming time globally. It's been 5 months that the M&A figures have been above $500 billion, and it has happened only 5 times since 2000. So for the last 20 years, we've never had such amounts of M&A, and this is also seen in France. In France, we have a lot of transactions. Obviously, some of them in technology. It's another way to fund growth. Hopefully, if you do not delocalize, if you remain active in France. Why that? A lot of factors. We could spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, access to funding is one. Seeking growth is another one. And through M&A.
Thank you very much. Unless you want absolutely to add something, thank you, Samuel, Philippe, Maya, Samuel. In a word, if I understand you, your message to investors is let's invest in Paris. Technology is here, growth is here, expertise is here, and there are companies of various size. Paris is definitely engaged to facilitate investment. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this great added value. Next session, I believe, is hosted by Adrien that will talk about Glasgow. Arnaud, the word is yours. Thank you for your attention.